Thank you so much, Mike, for that kind introduction, and hello to everyone in our virtual audience today. I know that you all are busier than ever, and I really appreciate everyone taking some time out of their schedules to talk about some of the most critical topics we are facing today. As Mike said, Dr. Billy Bardin and I are going to share some insights about manufacturing workforce trends that we've seen coming. And we're also going to talk about some specific examples of how manufacturers had to think about their workforce strategies when COVID-19 hit. So before we dive in, I thought we'd at least start with a little bit of context for those of you who don't know who MxD is and why am I here today talking about workforce development. So MxD, we are one of 16 manufacturing innovation institutes all across the country, 9 of which are funded by the US Department of Defense, which is we are that as well. And we are the second oldest institute, and we're launched in February 2014. So over the last 5 years, we have established a network of hundreds of projects. We've launched over 60 collaborative projects and built a one-of-a-kind innovation center with a 22,000 square foot factory test bed in Chicago. Come and visit when you can safely. We also are the National Center for Cybersecurity in Manufacturing. So on our anniversary in 2019, our 5-year anniversary, we announced a new 5-year contract with the US Department of Defense. And so that partnership really has allowed us to double down on some initiatives that we've worked hard to establish, including workforce development, because we know we need to meet the needs and goals of the US government, our national consortium, and really the needs of the United States and the global economy. So, manufacturing industry, it's undergoing a digital transformation. It's important to remember, though, that digital tools are fantastic. I know we're going to do a lot of talk about that, but they are meaningless without the capable workforce to operate them. So given our role working with industry, academic, and government partners, as I said, we're a nonprofit public-private partnership. I'm also often asked, what do you see coming as it relates to the skills revolution, and how well has the industry prepared for this? So I hope this is not a surprise to everyone that's listening, but the harsh truth is this: industry is not prepared. Large industry is not prepared. Small industry is not prepared. Academia is not prepared. More than half of all manufacturers identify building a skilled workforce as their greatest challenge. You'll see on this side here some of the statistics. We know that there will be 4.6 million manufacturing jobs in the US by 2028. 2.4 million of those jobs, that's 53 out of every 100 jobs, will go unfilled due to a skilled shortage. At MxD, we know how quickly the manufacturing landscape is evolving. It's part of the work we do. So given this, the manufacturers who will be the most successful going forward are those who expect change and who support and encourage adaptability and continuous learning, both for their workforce and themselves. So in short, one of the most prevalent trends we've seen across the entire industry is that manufacturers need new roles, employees need new skills, and academia needs new curriculum if we're truly going to be prepared for the future of manufacturing. So let's talk about another big trend, right? What is happening right now with COVID-19? We all know this is having a huge impact, not just on our bottom line, but across systemically all over the United States and the world. So what has COVID-19 really done? Well, it's accelerated, it's emphasized, and created new workforce challenges for manufacturers. So early in this pandemic, many MxD members approached us for support and how they can fight and how they can compete in this new world order, if you will. So we have a workforce arm, MxD Learn, and basically we double on our initial investments so we could have an immediate impact on this current employment crisis. specifically as it relates to a hybrid learning approach, talking about the areas, for example, of cybersecurity in manufacturing. So while the pandemic, we all know this, has put many traditional jobs on hold, it's actually also created new jobs. So you look at cybersecurity and the increased importance of securing US manufacturing and supply chains. So cybersecurity as an applied STEM career path, that's one way and an example of how you can offer students or transitioning workers a bright outlook in career demand and growth. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the cybersecurity unemployment rate was projected to remain at 0% through 2021. And with this broadening digital landscape, the demand is going to climb even higher. And I'd also want to talk a little bit about the stark truth of some of the minority roles who have been impacted. So let's talk a little bit about women in the workforce and how they've been impacted by COVID-19. According to some new jobs data that were released, 55% of the net 9.8 million jobs lost since February were jobs held by women. And that number doesn't even include the millions of women who have left the labor force due to pandemic-related childcare issues. When broken down even further, Latina and Black women experienced unemployment levels that were higher than the women's overall unemployment rate of 6.3%. And let's talk about this. This pain extends all the way up to the C-suite level, right? And a recent executive level survey reported that the pandemic showed that nearly 30% of C-suite women or vice president level reported that the pandemic had actually altered the course of their career. About 25% of these women said they would leave their posts sooner than expected due to their employer's response to the pandemic. That's some scary statistics here. And manufacturers, and frankly, all US employers, they have to be more creative and diligent in finding ways to attract women and minorities to the workforce. At MxD, we believe that more flexible training options, including these virtual and hybrid learning methods, will actually be a key factor to attracting and retaining this important sector. So that's just a little bit about, some of the trends that we see happening. I want to hand it over now, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Billy Bardin, the Global Operations Digitalization Director at Dow, and also my very good friend. He is going to discuss a little bit about how Dow has prepared for and responded to some of these really critical industry workforce challenges. So take it away, Billy.
Yeah, hi, Chandra, and thanks to the ARC team and for you for inviting me to be here today to talk a little bit about Dow's response to COVID-19 and how things have been going over the past year. I also like to say good morning and good evening and good afternoon to the audience, no matter when and where you might be watching this video. There's no doubt that what happened in 2020 affected many ways how companies do business. If you look at Dow specifically, it impacted our employees, it impacted our customers, it impacted our clients, our communities, all of our stakeholders. And so Dow, we developed a corporate-wide, global-wide response. And we're a global company. We have operating sites around the globe. We have sales offices around the globe. We were able to see this coming from Asia, rolling through Europe and into North America and Latin America and South America as the year progressed. And so based on our experiences in Asia Pacific early in the first quarter, we were able to tailor some responses for Europe and the Americas that helped us manage the overall impacts. And one of the first things we started to do was stand up our global response teams. And very quickly, we learned that we had to have an overall unified plan of how we're going to approach that with lots of local input, because every region was different, every locality, every local government had different restrictions and different approaches. We were fortunate in Dow that we did have already considered all the way back in 2019 a response to global pandemic. So we had a very unified, very structured global pandemic response plan in place. But I can tell you, as this progressed and we saw COVID move from region to region, we learned a lot and we had to be adaptable and agile and change. And the basic function of our global pandemic plan was true and guided us from our principles and our perspectives. But we bolted on a lot, and as we gained more knowledge, we implemented new procedures and processes. One of the very first things we did was develop what we call our return to workplace playbook, which you see here on the left side of the screen. We use this internally initially to set our principles, how we would work with our employees and our customers and clients. But then we saw a need in the industry, and then Chandra mentioned the manufacturing institutes and how they work with the community. I think one of the things I'm most proud of about the Dow team is our impact on the community. So we made our internal playbook available to the industry. It's been downloaded, I think, more than 2,000 times by this point. Shared that with our colleagues in academia, with our stakeholders in government, to able to leverage out the approaches we were taking, setting very clear criteria of when we would bring people back to the workplace or not, how we would have those people interact in terms of social distancing and safe practices within the workplace, what we would do in terms of cleaning and sanitizing, setting new corporate expectations and new guidelines around how we work and work safely. And we're a large manufacturer. We had to keep our facilities running, and we've throughout the pandemic in all of our regions had our facilities running. We continue to do our maintenance and work practices. We continue to do turnarounds, albeit in a new way. One would have never imagined in January of 2020 that we would be working. And I think our response also enabled us to meet our economic targets as best as possible in a very severe economic downturn, and it enabled Dow to help the community. Some of the things we looked at very quickly in the first quarter even of last year, we started to ramp up production of hand sanitizer, which was, if you recall, in very high demand by hospitals and local health associations. There wasn't enough to go around, so we started tailoring our asset base to make hand sanitizer, ultimately making somewhere near 200 metric tons for distribution to local community health resources. We started to look at our product portfolio. Where were we having impact? So things like our packaging business, where lots of people were eating at home and the need for individual food packaging went up. So we started to tailor and make sure we had production in those product areas. Taking our polyethylene film and making PPE, as we had PPE shortages in the early days of the pandemic. And so PPE, polyethylene suits, PPE masks, those sorts of things we were involved with. And then ultimately in our silicones business, we have a lot of products that go into healthcare, whether it's for ventilators and silicones for tubing for IVs, but all of those demands we met. We made sure we had safe and reliable production to enable the healthcare community to respond to the pandemic as it was progressing. I think the other thing that I really look back on and how we responded was bringing digital skills to the table and looking at what we could do to predict how the pandemic would progress, how we would set criteria that would allow us to safely return people back to work with advanced modeling, looking at optimization of resources, looking at new supply chains and bringing digital skills into the supply chain. As we know, there was a lot of impact around supply chain as regions started up or shut down or had restrictions. And so like everyone else in the manufacturing and the community and the industry broadly, we had to manage our supply chain, make sure that we were addressing needs and making a more resilient, robust program from a supply chain perspective. So there's no doubt there was a lot of impacts. We have had over the last year a significant portion of our personnel working from home. We had our manufacturing personnel working in the facilities. We had our global SMEs that normally would travel for turnarounds and inspections. We found ways to use digital skills and digital tools like field collaboration systems to enable them to participate without having to actually physically be at the plant site or location. And one of the best aspects I like about my role is that I get to help Dow deploy these digital tools across R&D and supply chain manufacturing and sort of be a champion or push the digital transformation within the company. And that goes all the way from our supply chain and raw material components, all the way through our manufacturing, through production planning, and ultimately to delivering those materials to the customer. And we've seen, and Dow in fact doubled down on its investment in 2020 when it comes to deploying digital tools and digital capabilities. There's no doubt that the way we do work going forward is not going to be the way that we did work pre-pandemic. And we have to therefore uplift and reskill the workforce to use those digital capabilities. Most of our staff had never participated in the number of virtual meetings, virtual conferences, remote collaboration that they have done over the last 12 months. And I think Dow has been very successful at ensuring that we kept the business running. We had those capabilities for the employees to use to collaborate. And some of our most our newest and most dynamic teams, things like we have in our Digital Operations Center, which are tasked to look at digital skills. They started collaborating remotely from an open work collaborative environment in person, started collaborating remotely and didn't miss a beat. They've essentially continued their role. Same with our R&D teams, with our finance teams. They're doing things today that they never would have imagined being able to do remotely or collaboratively over net meetings and WebEx and other collaboration tools that they would have thought about in 2019. Total transformation of how Dow works top to bottom. But in the end, the objectives of Dow still remain the same: to be sustainable, to have safe, reliable production that meet our customers' needs. And in fact, we have been able to do that by addressing with agility the challenges that we faced in 2020. Okay, well, maybe at this point we ought to bring Chandra back into the call and have a little bit of a chat about how she has seen from her position and with MxD the changes and the differences amongst the industry players, and what maybe take-home messages or key takeaways you could discuss for success around those that have performed well in the pandemic conditions. Chandra, you back with us?
I am. Thank you for inviting me back, and thank you so much for all those insights and the great work that Dow has been doing. I love having those real-world examples. I think it's really important. So yes, let's talk a little bit. One of the things I love about my job is that, we're at the intersection, right? Public companies, private companies, big companies, small companies, academia, I just love it. And so we see really what's going on across the nation. And I've really, I think that there's been two, let's say, common themes. And we've really seen this change and improve actually during COVID-19. And the first one is that importance of leveraging digital technologies. I know exactly what you were saying, right? We've always known digital technologies are important, but the pandemic has just increased the importance of it. And we just know it's whether it's productivity for workers, whether it's for efficiency on your plant floors. We know that we must have more data-driven decision-making, and especially when things are changing so rapidly, it just becomes even more critical. We look at our supply chains, right, and what happened during the pandemic, and how we know we need to get them the right answers and the right data quicker. So I think that's one of the good things, is that we know that there's tools out there that we can harness them, and that we need to help, the entire supply chain become more resilient to really help us respond as a nation, to this crisis. I think the second big lesson or takeaway that we've learned is that talking to our members across this whole ecosystem, that it really is the power of collaboration that made a lot of things possible. I loved some of the examples you gave, Billy, and I know you opened up, some of your playbooks, right, and how-tos. We put things online, such as how to make a PPE mask, safe digital instructions. All of us had to come together in the beginning, little mom and pop shops making PPE equipment. We did the same at MxD. We're not really a big production facility like Dow, but we did our part and made masks for the local hospital workers. And I think that's super important. And we all learned that, we must collaborate. And I think this is so great because manufacturers, right, we're doers. That's our very nature inherent. And our natural response in a crisis is to do and to make. And, that's really what we did. And I think these strong partnerships, we always talk about this importance of this public-private partnerships, like MxD, like ARC, like lots of other groups, in your own local areas, is that we're going to come to better solutions quicker. And the only way you get out of these global crises is actually by working together and collaborating.
Yeah, that's true. We saw that in our value chain as well. We worked with customers to look at how we could make PPE available more quickly. We looked at actually based on demand we were seeing from some of our value chain partners. We restarted an isopropanol asset, for example, that had been idled for almost a couple of years, but you could see the immediate demand. And so we worked with our partners to push that product into the market. And the Dow team did a great job of restarting that asset safely and making it produce product. We looked at how we could collaborate remotely with customers, something that we had done in the past on occasion, but never to the extent that we did in the past year, bringing them into our product development facilities, standing up all new virtual customer interaction facilities that we could use to showcase products, to design products, to look at how we would put our materials into their products, help them meet their immediate economic and community and market needs, but also longer range goals like sustainability goals, for example. And so the way we worked was totally dynamic. It had to be in the current conditions. And in fact, I expect we're going to see a lot more of that post-pandemic.
Oh, I totally agree. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I mean, some of these are good lessons learned, right? That's going to carry us forward, in the future. I have another question for you, Billy, and like from your leadership kind of perspective in the industry, how would you recommend manufacturers continue to prioritize engagement with the community on these workforce development initiatives? Like, we all know there's so many things pulling at our time and energy. How would you say that they should do that?
Yeah, workforce development is an investment. It has to be considered that way. You're going to get the return in 3 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years as you invest in your workforce, and the people you onboard today or you train or give new skills to today will become leaders in the future. I mean, Dow and MxD have been partners since the beginning back in 2014. And I think some of the taxonomies that MxD has put together around digital skills and cybersecurity have been great guides for the industry in terms of what roles could be contemplated in the new economy and a new way of working. And for us at Dow, for example, during this time, we doubled down on investments in skills and workforces. We looked at increasing our interactions, for example, with HBCUs. Now, you mentioned in your opening remarks about the underrepresented groups in the manufacturing area. We're trying to entice and increase that pool with some of the work that we're doing through our Dow Acts program to bring on underrepresented groups within the manufacturing community. We also started to deploy new digital skill roles like site cybersecurity and IT specialists that they're not classic business IT people that are supporting ERP systems. They're deploying and supporting frontline collaboration systems, mobile worker devices, those sorts of things, as well as enhancing our cybersecurity profile at our manufacturing facilities. And so we see that as a critical need. I think if you look to how we're trying to bring on new skills within our process operators and process technicians, for example, we started to put digital skills into our process tech courses from where we hire our process operators. And we're doing things like digital co-ops, where we bring college graduates or college students, engineers onto Dow site and give them experience in an analytics group and a process control group. And then when they go back to campus, for example, they take bolt-on courses in data science and analytics. Those two go hand in hand to bring a much more data savvy worker to the organization when they're hired full time. We didn't stop that during the last year. In fact, we increased our interactions there and continue to work diligently to make those investments in workforce. I think you see that as organizations grow, they're going to look for skills. They're going to look for certification of skills, not necessarily four-year college degrees, but look at how you have micro certificates or micro degrees, certifications, online training, things that actually show and one can demonstrate they have those skills to make themselves a candidate for a position. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a bachelor's degree in engineering anymore to get those kind of roles. It's more about what the person can do as much as it is about the piece of paper that's hanging on the wall behind them.
I completely agree with everything you said. It's so funny. I tell this all the time. Like, when I used to be a CEO of a metal manufacturing company, I was always, I needed more welders and fitters and machinists, and we still have that skilled trade shortage in the United States and honestly globally. But now at MxD, I'm even more worried about the looming, digital and cyber gap that's coming. I mean, when I think about, you heard me say 2.4 million manufacturing jobs unfilled, this is absolutely going to take a community effort, and the investments need to happen now. That's why I really appreciate, Dow kind of leading by example on what you did during the pandemic. And I love, we're doing the same thing with apprenticeships, and, what we did last year is, again, really get to this cyber hiring guide, because we're really worried about, the cyber. If we're not securing our data, you can have all the data in the world, but it needs to be secure. So we're really a big believer in that. We're going to have to bring, again, this whole community together. And as a manufacturer myself, I always wanted to know, like, what is my region need? How can I prioritize it? And we really have, when I say community, I mean, you know, all the way, right? We know this, but like from the high schools, you have to start young too, like, so you can start at the high school level, right? And then go all the way through community colleges, regular universities, but don't forget things like juvenile detention centers, regional economic groups, local areas, like you said, apprenticeships, unions. There's so much that, you know, you really need to bring together in your own community and figure out how you can best help, you know, the manufacturers of that region. And I want to echo one other thing you said too, you know, when you talk about the certifications and other things, you know, traditional learning methods, right? We're gonna have to get a lot more creative, right? They're too rigid. You know, flexibility is gonna be, I think, in premium, and that we're going to need to really prepare, and this includes academics and industry, are gonna have to prepare for continuous learning, right? And probably hybrid. That's the other thing we've seen. We're gonna be working on getting out some hybrid training sessions, both in person and virtually, because I think it's gonna be a really new way we need to reach people. And don't forget about upskilling, you know, our existing, right, incredible workforce. And, you know, again, I love that you're doing work with HBCUs and minority communities, because we will not get there without them. That's just a fact. So I hope everyone, you know, found this discussion helpful. You know, as a reminder, Billy and I are always happy to answer any questions. So feel free to reach out. You know, we love supporting the manufacturing community as a whole. And I really want to thank everyone at ARC for organizing this forum. And thanks very much also to my good friend, Dr. Billy Bardin, for joining me. And thanks everyone. Please stay safe and take care.
Thank you much.